Jake sat at his desk, the dim light of his lamp casting long shadows across the room. It was a typical evening in their small town, the kind of night where the sounds of crickets and distant cars made the world feel both familiar and isolating. In front of him lay a collection of family photos, each encased in a cheap wooden frame, their glossy surfaces reflecting fragments of memories he wished he could forget. He picked up a photo from their last family vacation, a snapshot of his mother, Sarah, beaming as they stood on the beach, the sun setting behind them. Next to her was Tom, his new stepfather, grinning with an ease that always seemed rehearsed. Jake's stomach twisted at the sight. It was only a few weeks since the wedding, and yet the image felt like a cruel reminder of everything that had changed. "Why did you have to marry him?" Jake muttered under his breath, his voice barely a whisper. His fingers traced the outline of Tom's face in the photo, feeling an inexplicable anger surge within him. Tom had charmed everyone that day, from the guests at the ceremony to the caterers, with his suave demeanor and infectious laughter. But Jake had sensed something off, a dissonance that gnawed at the back of his mind. He recalled the wedding reception, the way Tom had swept Sarah off her feet with his smooth talk and warm gestures. Everyone had laughed at his jokes, completely oblivious to the subtle way Tom's gaze lingered on Jake, as if assessing him, calculating his next move. Jake had felt an unsettling shiver run down his spine then, a whisper of instinct that warned him to be cautious. With a heavy sigh, he tossed the photo back onto the desk and leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. "What are you hiding, Tom?" he pondered, feeling the weight of uncertainty crushing him. The walls of his room felt like they were closing in, and he desperately wished he could turn back time before Tom had entered their lives. Dinner was always a tense affair now, filled with polite conversation that tasted bitter in Jake's mouth. He trudged down the hallway, the scent of something savory wafting toward him, mingling with the faint sounds of clinking cutlery. As he entered the dining room, he was greeted by the sight of Sarah sitting at the table, her face radiant with happiness. Tom was bustling around the kitchen, tossing a salad with an exaggerated flourish, his movements smooth and practiced. "Jake, come sit," Sarah called, her voice bright. "Tom made his famous chicken Alfredo tonight. You're gonna love it." "Yeah, great," Jake replied, pulling out a chair and sitting down. He forced a smile, but inside, his heart raced. Tom turned, a broad grin on his face, and for a moment, Jake felt a flicker of something akin to dread. There was a glint in Tom's eyes, something predatory that sent a chill down Jake's spine. "Hey buddy, how was school today?" Tom asked, his tone light and friendly. But Jake noticed the way his eyes lingered a little too long on him, a subtle weight that made Jake's skin crawl. "Fine," Jake muttered, pushing his food around on the plate. He felt the tension in the air, thick and tangible, as Sarah enthusiastically praised Tom's culinary skills. "He's really taken to cooking, hasn't he?" she gushed, her eyes sparkling with admiration. "Just trying to impress my new family," Tom replied, flashing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Jake could feel his jaw tightening, anger bubbling just beneath the surface. It was as if Tom was playing a role, acting out the part of the perfect stepfather while hiding a darker truth. As the conversation continued, Jake's unease grew. He listened as Tom talked about his job, the way he described his colleagues, and the little anecdotes that seemed too polished, too rehearsed. Jake's mind drifted, imagining the secrets that lay beneath Tom's perfect exterior. He wanted to scream, to tell his mother that something was wrong, but the fear of her disappointment paralyzed him. Later that night, after the dishes were cleared and the house settled into an eerie silence, Jake lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. He was restless, tossing and turning as thoughts spiraled in his mind. The sound of raised voices suddenly pierced the stillness, pulling him from his thoughts. He strained to listen, his heart pounding. "Tom, you can't keep doing this." Sarah's voice was sharp, filled with an urgency that sent a jolt of fear through Jake. He slipped out of bed, his feet padding quietly across the wooden floor as he approached the door, pressing his ear against it. "Why do you always have to make everything so difficult?" Tom's voice was low, almost a growl, and Jake's stomach twisted at the hostility it contained. "I'm doing what's best for us, for this family." "Best for us, or best for you?" Sarah retorted, her voice trembling with emotion. "You need to stop lying to me, Tom. I can't keep pretending everything is fine." Jake's heart raced as he strained to catch more of their conversation, but the words turned into a blur of anger and frustration. He felt a knot of dread forming in his stomach, a chilling realization that their seemingly perfect life was unraveling. He stepped back from the door, retreating to his room as a wave of nausea washed over him. The warmth of the evening had turned cold, and he felt utterly alone. Jake buried his face in his pillow, holding back the tears that threatened to spill over. It wasn't just Tom he was afraid of. It was the possibility that his mother was in danger and he couldn't protect her. As he lay there, thoughts swirled in his mind. He had to know more about Tom. He needed to uncover the truth, no matter how terrifying it might be. The unease that had settled in his chest would not let him rest until he did. Jake vowed to himself that he would dig deeper, even if it meant confronting the darkness that lurked behind Tom's charming facade. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow, he would begin his search for the truth, driven by a fierce loyalty to the only family he had left. But even as he drifted off to sleep, the gnawing fear whispered in his ear, reminding him that some secrets were meant to stay buried and that the truth could be more dangerous than he ever imagined. Jake sat at his usual spot in the cafeteria, the table in the far corner where he could observe everything while remaining mostly invisible. The chatter of his classmates buzzed around him, a cacophony of laughter and gossip. But he felt detached, lost in his worries about Tom. The vibrant colors of the cafeteria seemed muted in comparison to the storm brewing in his mind. Mike, his best friend, slid into the seat across from him, a half-eaten sandwich in hand. "Hey man, you okay? You've been quiet lately." Jake forced a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Yeah, just thinking about stuff." "Stuff? Or Tom?" Mike raised an eyebrow, clearly not buying the casual dismissal. "You need to talk about it. What's going on?" Jake sighed, glancing around to ensure no one was eavesdropping. "I'm just worried about my mom. Tom seems off. I don't know how to explain it." "Off how? Like weird or dangerous?" Mike leaned in closer, his expression shifting from concern to intrigue. "Both, I guess. He acts all charming around her, but sometimes I catch these looks, like he's sizing me up or something. And last night, I overheard them fighting. It didn't sound good, Mike." Mike's eyes widened. "Dude, you have to tell your mom. She deserves to know if he's not who he pretends to be." "But what if I'm wrong? What if I ruin everything?" Jake's voice was tight with frustration. "I can't do that to her." "Then you need to figure out what's really going on. You can't just sit back and hope for the best." Mike's tone was steady, firm. "You're a good son, Jake. Protecting her means being honest, even if it's hard." Jake nodded slowly, the weight of Mike's words settling over him. He knew he had to do something, but the thought of confronting Tom made his stomach churn. I think I need to look into Tom's past, see if there's something I'm missing." "Good idea. I'll help you," Mike offered, his determination shining through. After school, Jake and Mike headed to Jake's house, where the quiet was almost eerie. The weight of uncertainty hung heavily in the air as they made their way to Jake's room. Once inside, Jake flicked on his computer, the screen illuminating his face in the dim light. "How do we even start?" Mike asked, peering over Jake's shoulder as he typed Tom's name into the search bar. "Let's see if we can find any records or news articles. Maybe something will come up," Jake replied, his fingers racing across the keyboard. The minutes turned into an agonizing wait. Jake's heart raced as he scrolled through various links, each click leading to a growing sense of dread. Then, amid the mundane results, he stumbled upon a link that made his breath hitch, a public criminal record. "Jake, is that it?" Mike pointed at the screen, his voice low. "Yeah, it's him. It has to be." Jake's hands trembled slightly as he clicked the link. The page loaded, revealing a history he never expected. Assault charges from nearly a decade ago stared back at him, and his chest tightened as he read the details. "What does it say?" Mike asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "It says he was arrested for assault. Multiple charges, actually. How did my mom not know about this?" Jake's mind raced, piecing together the implications. What if he's not changed? What if he's dangerous? "Dude, you need to tell her this," Mike said urgently. "She has to know who she's living with." "I can't just walk up to her and drop this bomb," Jake replied, his voice thick with anxiety. "What if she doesn't believe me? Or worse, what What if she defends him? Then you have to show her the proof. This isn't just some rumor, it's a documented fact. She deserves to know the truth, Mike insisted. Jake leaned back in his chair, the weight of the world pressing down on him. What if this tears our family apart? I don't want to be the reason she gets hurt. Not knowing the truth could hurt her more in the long run, Mike countered, his expression earnest. You're her son. You have to protect her. The conversation hung in the air, heavy with unspoken fears and uncertainty. Jake knew Mike was right, but the thought of confronting Tom, of confronting the reality of his mother's choices, was terrifying. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Jake found himself in the kitchen, the familiar smells of dinner wafting through the air. His mother hummed to herself, seemingly blissfully unaware of the storm brewing in her son's heart. Tom was at the table, casually flipping through a magazine, his demeanor relaxed. It made Jake's skin crawl. "Hey Jake, how was school?" Tom asked, his voice cheerful, but there was an edge to it that Jake couldn't ignore. "Fine," Jake muttered, avoiding eye contact. His stomach churned as he thought about the conversation he needed to have. "Just fine. You should try my famous pasta next time." Tom smiled, but Jake felt the pressure of his gaze, as if Tom were trying to read his thoughts. "Uh-huh," Jake replied, forcing a smile. He couldn't shake the feeling that Tom was playing a part, and he was the audience watching the performance unfold. As dinner progressed, Jake's anxiety grew. He wanted to speak up, to warn his mother, but the words were stuck in his throat. The laughter and lighthearted banter between Tom and Sarah felt like a cruel joke, a facade that was ready to shatter. When dinner ended, Jake excused himself, retreating to his room. The walls felt like they were closing in around him, and he needed space to think. He paced back and forth, trying to organize his thoughts. Suddenly, he heard footsteps approaching. It was Mike, who had decided to check in on him. "Hey man, you okay?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe. "No, I'm not okay. I found out some stuff about Tom and I don't know what to do," Jake confessed, running a hand through his hair. "What did you find?" Mike prompted, concern etched on his face. "Criminal record, assault charges. He's not who he says he is, Mike. I can't just let this go." Jake's voice trembled, the weight of the revelation crashing down on him. "Then you have to act. You can't let him keep your mom in the dark. You need to confront him," Mike urged, his determination unwavering. "Tonight?" Jake's eyes widened at the thought. "Why not? The longer you wait, the more dangerous it gets. You need to know if he's a threat, and you can't do that without asking him directly." A knot formed in Jake's stomach at the idea, but he knew Mike was right. He had to confront Tom, to find out what lay beneath the surface of that charming facade. "Okay, I'll do it," Jake said, his voice steadier than he felt. "But I need you here. I might need backup." Mike nodded, a supportive smile breaking across his face. "I've got your back, man. Always." As the evening wore on, Jake felt the anticipation build alongside the dread. He was ready to face the truth, no matter how terrifying it might be. The stakes had never felt higher, and he knew that once he spoke to Tom, there would be no turning back. Jake woke up the next morning feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders. He stared at the ceiling, the words he had rehearsed over and over in his mind. Telling his mother the truth was no longer a choice. It was a necessity. He had to confront her about Tom, to warn her about the man she had chosen to let into their lives. The thought of losing her trust made his stomach churn, but the thought of her being in danger was worse. After getting ready for school, Jake couldn't shake the feeling of dread that hung over him. Each tick of the clock seemed to mock his anxiety. He arrived at school, but the classes felt like a blur. His mind was consumed with images of his mother laughing at Tom's jokes, blissfully unaware of the darkness that lurked behind his charming facade. During lunch, he sought out Mike, his best friend, hoping for some comfort. "Hey man, you look like you've seen a ghost," Mike said, raising an eyebrow as he took a bite of his sandwich. "I'm serious, Mike. I need to talk to my mom about Tom tonight. I don't know how to tell her," Jake said, glancing around as if the walls could hear his confession. "Just be honest with her. She deserves to know what you found out. You've got to protect her," Mike encouraged, leaning forward, his voice low. "If Tom is really dangerous, then you can't just stay silent." "Yeah, I know. But what if she doesn't believe me? What if she gets mad? It's not like I'm accusing him of anything without proof," Jake admitted, frustration creeping into his voice. "Just tell her what you know. If she doesn't listen, at least you tried, Mike replied, trying to reassure him. The afternoon dragged on, each minute feeling like an hour. When Jake walked through the front door of his house, he found it quiet, too quiet. His heart raced as he thought about the dinner he had planned in his mind. It was supposed to be a simple meal, but it felt like a stage where he would reveal a terrible secret. "Mom, I'm home," he called out, his voice echoing in the silence. He made his way to the kitchen, where he found Sarah chopping vegetables, her face illuminated by the warm light of the overhead lamp. "Hey, Jake, how was school?" she asked, her smile bright and welcoming. "Fine," he replied, forcing a smile. "Can we talk later? I need to discuss something important." Sarah looked up, a hint of concern crossing her features. "Sure, honey. Is everything okay?" "Yeah, it's just something I need to tell you about Tom," he said, his heart pounding in his chest. Before he could say more, Tom entered the kitchen, his presence instantly changing the atmosphere. "What's going on in here?" he asked, his voice light and teasing. "Are you two planning a surprise party for me?" Jake felt the tension rise in the room. "Actually, I was just telling Mom that Why don't we just enjoy dinner first?" Tom interrupted, his tone playful but his eyes sharp. "I made your favorite, Jake. You know how much effort I put into it." As they sat down at the table, Jake's resolve wavered. Tom was effortlessly charming, cracking jokes and making Sarah laugh, her eyes sparkling with joy. With every joke, Jake felt the words he had prepared slip further away. He clenched his fists under the table, battling his frustration and fear. "Come on, Jake. Don't just sit there looking all serious. What do you think of my famous spaghetti?" Tom asked, a smirk on his face. "It's good," Jake mumbled, barely managing to keep his voice steady. "Just good? I thought I nailed the sauce this time." Tom laughed, giving Sarah a playful nudge. "You know I take pride in my cooking." Jake watched as Sarah beamed at Tom, her laughter ringing in his ears. It infuriated him. How could she be so blind? "Mom, I really need to talk to you," he said again, a bit more forcefully. "Jake, can it wait? We're having a nice dinner. Let's not spoil it," Tom interjected, his eyes narrowing ever so slightly. "Tom, I think Jake has something important to say," Sarah said, her expression shifting to one of concern. "No, it's fine," Jake replied, forcing a smile to mask his frustration. "Forget it." The rest of the dinner passed in a blur. Jake felt like he was trapped in a cage, watching the life he wanted slip away. Tom kept the conversation light, expertly steering it away from anything that could disrupt the atmosphere. As they cleared the table, Jake felt a sense of defeat wash over him. He had let Tom win, and it left a bitter taste in his mouth. Later that night, Jake couldn't shake the feeling of helplessness. While Sarah was in her room, he crept down the hallway, drawn to her space like a moth to a flame. He hesitated outside her door, his heart racing with uncertainty. Finally, he pushed the door open quietly, hoping to find something that could help him understand his mother better. His eyes scanned the room until they landed on a small box tucked away on a shelf. Curious, he grabbed it and opened it to find old letters, faded and yellowed with age. As he read through them, his heart sank. They were filled with words of love and pain, detailing struggles with trust and betrayal. It became painfully clear that his mother had faced her share of abusive relationships in the past. "Why didn't you tell me, Mom?" Jake whispered to himself, his fingers trembling as he turned the pages. Each letter revealed a pattern: his mother's vulnerability, her desire for love, and her tendency to overlook warning signs. Anger flared within him, directed at Tom for taking advantage of her, but also at Sarah for not seeing the danger. Suddenly, footsteps echoed in the hallway, and Jake quickly put the letters back in the box, closing it just in time. He held his breath, straining to hear as Sarah walked past, unaware of his intrusion. The realization hit him hard. His mother was not just a victim of Tom's charm, she was a survivor of her own battles, and perhaps that was why she was drawn to him in the first place. Jake felt a mix of sympathy and frustration. He wanted to protect her, to be the guardian she needed, but how could he convince her that the man she loved was the same man who could destroy her? As he lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, Jake resolved to find a way to save his mother from the same fate that had ensnared her before. He wouldn't let Tom manipulate her, and he wouldn't allow her past to dictate her future. He would gather evidence, confront Tom again, and make her see the truth, no matter how painful it might be. The battle was just beginning, and Jake knew he had to be brave for both their sakes. Jake leaned against the cold brick wall of the alley, his heart pounding in his chest. The dim light from the flickering street lamp cast elongated shadows, but he and Mike remained hidden in the darkness, watching intently. They had been waiting for Tom to arrive, an uneasy tension binding them together. Mike whispered softly beside him, "Are you sure this is a good idea? What if he sees us?" Jake shushed him, his eyes fixed on the end of the alley where Tom's car had just pulled up. "We have to know what he's really up to. I can't shake this feeling that something's off," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. The resolve in his tone made Mike nod reluctantly, though his expression was still laced with apprehension. As Tom stepped out of the car, he looked around cautiously, his usual swagger absent. He glanced down the alley, and for a moment, Jake felt as if their eyes met, sending an electric shock of fear through him. But Tom continued on, moving deeper into the shadows. Jake and Mike exchanged glances, their stomachs churning with anxiety. "Who's he meeting?" Mike asked, his voice trembling slightly. "Let's find out," Jake replied, clenching his fists. They crept forward, inching closer to the meeting point. In the depths of the alley, another figure emerged, a man dressed in a dark hoodie, his features obscured by the shadows. Jake's breath caught in his throat. The air was thick with tension as Tom approached the man, their conversation too low for Jake to overhear. "What are they talking about?" Mike whispered, peering around the corner. The muffled voices hung in the air, indistinguishable, yet charged with an unsettling energy. Suddenly, the man pulled something from his pocket and handed it to Tom. Jake's heart raced as he strained to see. A glint of metal caught the faint light. Jake's mind immediately raced. Was it a weapon, or something else entirely? He felt a surge of dread wash over him. "Let's get closer," Jake urged, adrenaline coursing through him. He motioned for Mike to follow, and they crept along the side of the building, inching toward the edge of the alley, where they could see more clearly. As they turned the corner, Jake could finally hear snippets of their conversation. "You said this was the last time," the man hissed, his voice low and threatening. "I don't want to get caught up in your mess." Tom's response was barely audible, but the tone was unmistakably defensive. "You don't need to worry about that. Just keep your end of the deal." Jake's mind raced with questions. What deal? What mess? Each word felt like a puzzle piece falling into place, but the image it formed was terrifying. Suddenly, the man reached out and handed Tom a small package. Jake's eyes widened as he realized that Tom was involved in something much darker than he had initially suspected. He turned to Mike, who looked equally horrified. "We need to get out of here," Jake whispered urgently, his voice shaking. "This is bad." But before they could retreat, Tom's voice rose in anger. "You think you can just walk away? I'm not done with you yet." The man's face twisted in fear, and he took a step back, but Tom advanced, the tension crackling like static in the air. Jake felt his heart drop as he watched Tom's demeanor shift. The charming stepfather he had known was gone, replaced by someone dangerous and volatile. They needed to leave, and quickly. "Come on!" Jake pulled Mike away, and they slipped back into the shadows, their breath heavy in their chests. They hurried out of the alley, adrenaline pushing them forward, but Jake couldn't shake the feeling of dread that clung to him like a shadow. Once they reached the safety of the streetlights, they paused, panting heavily. "What the hell was that?" Mike exclaimed, his face pale. "I don't know, but we need to figure it out. This isn't just about his past. He's involved in something illegal," Jake said, his mind racing. "We can't tell my mom yet. She wouldn't believe us, and I can't risk her getting hurt." "Jake, this is serious. What if he finds out we were watching?" Mike warned, his eyes wide with fear. Jake ran a hand through his hair, the weight of the world pressing down on him. "We have to be smart about this. Let's follow him tomorrow to see where he goes to work. If we can gather more evidence, maybe we can convince my mom." Mike nodded, though uncertainty lingered in his eyes. "Okay, but we need a plan. If he's dangerous, we can't just walk into this blindly." The next morning, Jake woke with determination coursing through his veins. He had spent the night replaying the events from the alley in his mind, each moment amplifying his resolve. He would protect his mother, no matter the cost. At breakfast, Jake sat across from Sarah, who was blissfully unaware of the storm brewing beneath their roof. Tom was already gone, leaving behind the remnants of his presence in the form of a half-eaten breakfast and a lingering, uneasy atmosphere. Jake watched his mother as she stirred her coffee, her smile brightening the room. "Did you sleep well, honey?" Sarah asked, her voice warm and inviting. "Yeah, I did," Jake replied, forcing a smile. "Just a little tired." "Long night studying?" she asked, her eyes twinkling with maternal concern. "Something like that." Jake's throat felt tight, and he fought against the urge to spill everything he had learned. "Mom, do you think you could take the day off work tomorrow?" he asked, trying to sound casual. "Why? Is everything okay?" Sarah's brow furrowed slightly. I don't know. I thought it might be nice to have a family day," he said, improvising. "You know, just the three of us?" Sarah's smile faltered for a moment, but she quickly recovered. "That sounds lovely, Jake. Let me see if I can rearrange some meetings." Relief washed over Jake, but the anxiety returned as he thought about what he needed to do. After breakfast, he grabbed his backpack and headed out to meet Mike. They had a plan to follow Tom, but Jake felt a nagging sense of foreboding that gnawed at him. As they reached Tom's workplace, Jake felt a chill run down his spine. Tom had claimed to be a construction manager, but Jake couldn't shake off the feeling that it was a cover for something else. They stood outside, hidden behind a row of parked cars, watching as Tom pulled into the lot. "Okay, here we go," Jake whispered, his heart racing as he glanced at Mike. "Stay close and keep your eyes open." They followed Tom into the building, careful to stay out of sight. The interior was bustling with activity, workers moving in and out, but Tom somehow managed to slip through them without drawing attention. Jake felt his pulse quicken, a mix of adrenaline and fear propelling him forward. As they trailed Tom, Jake's mind replayed the previous night's encounter. What kind of man was he really? The more Jake learned, the more confused he became about his feelings toward Tom. Deep down, he wanted to believe in his mother's happiness, but the evidence was mounting against the man she had chosen to share her life with. Tom finally stopped in front of a door marked "Private." Jake and Mike exchanged glances, both aware that this was the moment they had been waiting for. "Let's listen," Jake urged, pressing his ear to the door. Inside, muffled voices could be heard, the tone urgent and clipped. Jake strained to catch a name or a detail, but the words were too indistinct. Suddenly, the door swung open, and Jake's breath caught in his throat as a man stepped out, his expression dark and menacing. "Get it done, or you'll regret it," he warned, shoving past Tom, who stood frozen in the doorway. Jake's instinct screamed at him to retreat, but he couldn't pull away. He had to know what was happening. He motioned for Mike to stay quiet as they edged closer, trying to catch more of the conversation. "Well?" the man inside demanded, his voice cutting through the air like a knife. "I don't have time for your excuses." "I'm working on it," Tom replied, his voice strained but trying to maintain a facade of calm. "Just give me a little more time." Jake felt a wave of nausea wash over him. What was Tom involved in? He could sense the danger looming, and it made him question everything he thought he knew about his stepfather. "Time is something you don't have," the man growled before storming out, leaving a tense silence in his wake. Tom stood alone in the room, his expression darkening as he ran a hand through his hair, frustration etched across his face. "Damn it," Tom muttered, pacing the small space. "I need to find a way out of this." Jake exchanged a horrified glance with Mike. They couldn't stay any longer. Without another word, they slipped away from the door, hearts racing as they headed back outside. As they reached the safety of the street, Jake felt the weight of the world pressing down on him. He had to act, but the question remained. Was he prepared for the consequences? The stakes were higher than ever, and he knew that the fight to protect his family was just beginning. Jake took a deep breath, his heart pounding in his chest, as he prepared to confront his mother. The living room was dimly lit, the flickering glow of the lamp casting long shadows on the walls. He had rehearsed this moment in his mind 1,000 times, yet the words felt heavy on his tongue. He could feel the weight of his discovery pressing down on him, the fear of what it might mean for his family swirling like a storm inside him. "Mom," Jake began, his voice trembling slightly as Sarah looked up from her magazine, surprised. "Can we talk for a minute?" "Of course, sweetheart," she replied, setting the magazine aside and giving him her full attention. "What's on your mind?" Jake hesitated, the tension in the air palpable. He wanted to tell her everything, the criminal record, the shady meetings, the sense of dread that had settled over him since Tom had entered their lives. But the look in her eyes, filled with warmth and trust, made it difficult to break that illusion. It's about Tom," he finally said, forcing the words out. "I've been doing some digging, and I think you should know. Jake, We've talked about this. Tom is a good man, Sarah interrupted gently, her voice soothing yet firm. He's changed. Look at how happy he makes me. But Mom, I found some stuff about his past. He has a criminal record, Jake pressed, his frustration building. I don't think you understand how serious this is. Sarah's expression hardened slightly. What exactly did you find? You can't just throw accusations around. Tom has been nothing but kind to us. Kind? Jake echoed incredulously. He's charming, sure, but it feels like there's something off. I can't shake this feeling that he's hiding something. I saw him in a dark alley meeting with someone shady, Mom. This isn't just me being dramatic. Jake, you're making a mountain out of a molehill, Sarah said, her voice rising slightly. You don't know what you're talking about. People can change. Maybe he was young and made mistakes. You're judging him based on the past. Jake felt a surge of anger and helplessness. He wanted to scream, to shake her until she saw the truth he could see so clearly. But what if he hasn't changed? He shouted, the words bursting out before he could rein them in. What if he's dangerous? Stop it, Sarah snapped, her patience wearing thin. You need to stop this. Tom loves us. He loves you. Why can't you see that? Jake's heart sank. He had hoped for understanding and support, not dismissal. Because love doesn't erase the past, Mom. He could put you in danger, and I can't just sit back and watch that happen. Sarah's face softened for a moment, but the resolve in her eyes remained. I appreciate your concern, Jake. I really do. But you need to trust me. I'm an adult, and I can handle my own relationships. Disheartened, Jake felt the weight of betrayal settle over him like a heavy blanket. He wanted to scream, to tell her that she was making a mistake, but instead, he nodded silently, the fight draining out of him. He stood up, feeling as though he had just lost a battle he hadn't even wanted to fight. I just want you to be safe, he murmured before leaving the room, the door clicking shut behind him with a finality that echoed in his heart. The next day, feeling utterly defeated, Jake decided to take matters into his own hands. He had to protect his mother, even if it meant going behind her back. He gathered the evidence he had collected about Tom and headed to the local police station, his palms sweaty and his heart racing. The weight of his choice pressed heavily on his chest, but he felt it was necessary. Inside the station, the atmosphere was tense, officers moving with purpose as they attended to various duties. Jake approached the front desk, his voice barely above a whisper. Excuse me, I need to speak to someone about a potential danger. The officer at the desk looked up, his brow furrowing. What kind of danger? Jake hesitated, unsure of how to phrase it without sounding crazy. It's about my stepfather, Tom. I think he's involved in something illegal. The officer leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. Do you have any evidence to support that claim? With a deep breath, Jake laid out everything he had gathered, the criminal record, the shady meeting he and Mike witnessed, and his own fears about Tom's behavior. The officer listened attentively, taking notes as Jake spoke. All right, the officer said after Jake finished. We'll look into it. But I need to warn you, this could take time, and you need to be careful. If what you're saying is true, you might be putting yourself and your family at risk. Jake nodded, the gravity of his situation weighing heavily on him. Thank you, he said, before walking out of the station, a mixture of relief and dread swirling within him. He had done the right thing, but at what cost? That night, as he lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, his phone buzzed beside him. He reached for it, his heart racing as he saw an anonymous message glaring back at him. Stop investigating, Tom. You have no idea what you're getting into. A chill ran down Jake's spine, the words sending a wave of fear crashing over him. He felt vulnerable, exposed, as if eyes were watching him from every corner of the room. Was Tom behind this message? The thought sent a shiver through him. Panic surged within him. He had thought that by going to the police, he was protecting his mother, but now he feared he had put them both in grave danger. What if Tom found out? What would he do then? Jake sat up in bed, his mind racing. The weight of the world felt like it was pressing down on him, suffocating him. He was caught in a web of deception, desperately trying to untangle the threads before it was too late. He needed to figure out what to do next, but all he could think about was his mother and the danger that lurked just beneath the surface of their seemingly perfect life. He couldn't shake the feeling that he had crossed a line, that he had ventured into a realm of darkness that he might never escape. The message loomed over him, a grim reminder of the stakes at hand. He had to act, but how? The very thought of confronting Tom again sent his heart racing, but he couldn't let fear dictate his actions. With renewed determination, Jake resolved to keep a close watch on Tom, to gather more information, and find a way to protect his mother, no matter the cost. But as he lay back down, the weight of uncertainty settled in his chest, and he couldn't help but wonder if he had just started a chain of events he would never be able to stop. Jake stood in the dimly lit kitchen, the air thick with tension as he faced Tom. The fluorescent light overhead flickered, casting shadows that seemed to dance ominously around them. His heart pounded in his chest as he took a deep breath, mustering every ounce of courage he had. "I want the truth, Tom. You can't keep lying to us," he demanded, his voice steady despite the fear that knotted his stomach. Tom leaned against the counter, arms crossed, a sardonic smile playing on his lips. "And what truth exactly are you looking for, Jake?" He feigned innocence, but Jake could see the flicker of something darker in his eyes. "You think you know me? You think you figured it all out?" "I know about your past," Jake shot back, his frustration boiling over. "I know about the charges, the assault. You can't just pretend that never happened." Tom's demeanor shifted in an instant. The smile vanished, replaced by a cold, hard glare. "You should be careful about what you dig into, kid. The past can bite back." His tone was low and menacing, and Jake felt a chill run down his spine. The tension in the room escalated as Jake pressed on, unwilling to back down. "You're a danger to my mom and me. I won't let you hurt her." Tom chuckled darkly, a sound that sent shivers through Jake. "You think you're the protector here? You have no idea who you're dealing with." He stepped forward, invading Jake's personal space, and Jake instinctively took a step back. "You've been to the police, haven't you?" "I know everything, Jake." Jake's heart raced as he processed Tom's words. The realization hit him like a cold wave. Tom had been watching him, anticipating his every move. "What do you want from us?" Jake challenged, trying to mask his fear with bravado. Tom's eyes narrowed, and the smile returned, but it was devoid of warmth. "What I want is for you to understand that you're in way over your head. You think you can just waltz in here and disrupt our lives? You don't know the half of it." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "But maybe you should. Maybe it's time for you to learn the truth about your family." Before Jake could respond, Tom reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, sleek object. In a flash, Jake recognized it as a knife, its blade glinting menacingly in the kitchen light. "You want the truth, Jake? Here's a piece of it." He held the knife casually, as if it were a toy, but Jake could see the threat behind his nonchalance. Just then, the kitchen door swung open, and Sarah walked in, her arms full of groceries. She froze at the sight before her, her eyes darting between Jake and Tom, confusion etched on her face. "What's going on here?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Jake felt a wave of panic wash over him. "Mom, stay back!" he shouted, instinctively moving to shield her. "Tom, put that down!" Sarah's gaze shifted to Tom, her expression shifting from confusion to alarm. "Tom, what are you doing?" she asked, fear creeping into her voice. Tom's expression softened for a brief moment, as if he were a different man entirely, but the moment passed and he hardened again. "Nothing that you need to worry about, Sarah. Just a little family discussion." Jake's heart raced as he realized the precariousness of their situation. "This isn't a discussion. He's dangerous, Mom. You need to listen to me." Tom's laughter echoed in the kitchen, a sound devoid of humor. "Dangerous? Is that what you think? You have no idea, Jake." He turned to Sarah, his tone shifting to one of mockery. "You really should have told him the truth about his father. He deserves to know." Sarah's face blanched, and she took a step back, her grip on the grocery bags faltering. "What do you mean?" she whispered, panic rising in her voice. Jake's stomach dropped at Tom's words. "What are you talking about?" he demanded, his mind racing. "What truth?" Tom's eyes gleamed with a disturbing mix of satisfaction and malice. "Oh, it's a lovely little story. Your father, Jake, the man you think you know." He paused for effect, letting the silence stretch uncomfortably long. "He wasn't the hero you've always imagined. He had his demons, just like me." "Stop it!" Jake shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. "You're lying." Tom stepped closer, the knife still in his hand, and Jake felt the heat of fear radiating off him. "Am I? Or am I just revealing the family secrets you've been too blind to see?" He leaned in closer, lowering his voice. "Your father was a man of many talents, Jake. But those talents came with a price." Sarah's eyes widened, tears glistening on her lashes. "Tom, please, don't do this," she pleaded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Oh, but it's too late for that, Sarah. The past has a way of catching up to us, doesn't it?" He turned his gaze back to Jake, his expression predatory. "You were always meant to find out, kid. It's in your blood." Jake shook his head in disbelief, feeling the ground shift beneath him. "You're lying! You don't know anything about my father." His voice trembled as he fought against the flood of emotions threatening to overwhelm him. Tom chuckled darkly, the sound echoing in the now silent kitchen. "You really don't know? Your father and I had a history, you see. We were more than just acquaintances. We were partners in crime, to be exact." He brandished the knife, letting it glint menacingly as he spoke. "And when he fell from grace, I was the one who picked up the pieces." Jake felt the world tilt on its axis. "What are you saying?" he whispered, his heart racing as the implications of Tom's words sunk in. "You're saying you and my father, you were involved in something illegal?" "Very astute, Jake. But it's not just that. Your father didn't just disappear. He ran away from his past, just like you're trying to do now. But unlike you, I'm not letting anyone escape." Tom's voice dropped to a chilling whisper. "And that includes you and your mother." Sarah stepped forward, her voice shaking. "Tom, this is enough. You need to put the knife down and leave Jake out of this." But Tom only laughed, a sound that echoed ominously in the small space. "You think you can protect him? You think you can shield him from the truth? You're both in this mess together, whether you like it or not." Jake's mind raced, grappling with Tom's confession and the reality of his family's history. The walls felt as if they were closing in on him, and the truth hung heavy in the air between them. "If you think I'm going to let you hurt my mom or me, you're dead wrong," he said, trembling but resolute. Just as the tension reached its peak, Jake's phone buzzed in his pocket, a sudden reminder of the world outside this confrontation. It was a text from Mike, urging him to be careful. He couldn't afford to lose focus now. "I'm not afraid of you, Tom. I'll protect my mom no matter what." Tom sneered, his grip tightening on the knife. "Oh, you should be afraid. You have no idea what I'm capable of." He took a step closer, and Jake felt a surge of adrenaline rush through him. In that moment, everything changed. Jake's determination solidified into a fierce resolve. "I won't let you control our lives any longer." He took a step forward, matching Tom's intensity, ready to confront the darkness that had invaded their home. The atmosphere crackled with impending chaos, and as Jake prepared to fight for his family, he could feel the weight of the truth bearing down on him. The secrets, the lies, the darkness. It was all coming to a head. And in that kitchen, a battle for their future was about to unfold, where the stakes were higher than ever before. The chapter ended abruptly, leaving a lingering sense of tension and uncertainty as Jake and Tom faced off, each unwilling to back down. The fate of their family hung in the balance, teetering on the edge of revelation and confrontation.